Hi, my name is Eben Sadie of the Sadie family wines. I've literally just duct taped my phone to one of the vine posts. Yes, Berry Brothers and Rudd and the team, thank you for obviously presenting our new release. Just a small clip they've asked me to record. I'm going to be absent at the time of the tasting, but to just have a little bit of an overview of the 2025 release, the wines and what's changed and what's new and all of that. So yes, we've just come to the end of winter here in the Swartland. We've had our first days of spring. Most of the pruning in the vineyards have been done, and yes, we're ready to get stuck into a new year, and exciting times. And yeah, let's see what the new vintage brings. The majority of the 2025 release will be obviously the district series wines. They all single site expressions of given terroirs. The 2024 vintage as a whole for those wines, it was a difficult vintage on paper. Actually transpired to be better in reality, what for incredible anomalies in terms of vintage conditions that I'll share with you. But on paper, when we looked at 2024, we thought this is going to be a difficult one. Don't know about the resultant wines, what they're going to turn out to be, but all be said, it actually turned out phenomenal. And we couldn't really understand the vintage. On paper, the vintage didn't look to us as a classic or a great vintage. The prospects weren't that great. We had a very good winter in 2023. So when we started the new growing year, we had lots of water in the soil. All of our soils was on field capacity. But the rain stopped on the 26th of September 2023, and the first significant rain, or rain of any value truly, only came the next year on May the 16th. So that basically meant the entire growing season for starters, but 7 and a bit months, no rain whatsoever. And as we grow all of our vines unirrigated, rainfall has an immense effect on our resultant vintage qualities. So when we looked at the vintage on paper with our water recordings, rain, all of that, we couldn't actually have forecasted the effect. We packed out all our wines 6 months after harvest. We usually do 6 months after harvest autopsy on the entire vintage, growing conditions, all our viticultural reports, all of that. And one of the things that transpired for the 2024 vintage, even though we've had one of our driest growing seasons recorded, another anomaly was that we had literally 70% less wind for the entire season. Now, wind in the Cape is often overlooked and I think by and large misunderstood. It's a complete anomaly, you know, when you almost just have a third of your big window. So the moment winds start gusting over 8 knots, what you see is the stomata, the respiratory organs are under the leaves shut down. The vines go in a bit of a hibernation, because the plant just experiences a negative hydric pressure and basically shuts down. So what happens over the totality of a season, if you have a lot of that happening, is also in that time till it gets to that point, vines evapotranspirate a lot of water. So wind is very good to keep your to give a growing season healthy because of the reduction in humidity, but wind means that your leaves have a lot more evapotranspiration, and obviously also with the wind blowing over the surface area of the soil, it also increases your evapotranspiration and your water loss out of your soil. So with having had 70% of that reduction, it meant that our evapotranspiration over the entire season was significantly lower in comparison to most normal years. So we actually had a water preservation throughout the season and the growing season, and it was really the silver bullet for the vintage being the one that we experience in glass. And we're very grateful for that anomaly, because I think otherwise we would have sat with much more dehydrated system, potentially much riper fruit, potentially much lower acidities. And we managed to get all of the acidities, alcohol levels, all moderate, 13.5, good acidity, good pH. So we're very, very happy with the 2024 vintage. 2 new additions to the district range. Big news for us. We very rarely introduce new wines. These wines, the first wine to be introduced is actually the vineyard I'm standing in. This vineyard's name is Sonfang. Directly translated, it means sun catch. So catching the sun. The slope is orientated due west, gets a lot of the afternoon sun. And the varieties we've chosen to plant here is a big field blend. We've planted right where I'm standing now. This is Alicante Bouschet. Then we have Agiorgitico from Greece, Pontac, Trincadera, Tinta Barocca, Ludona Pelut, Bastardo Castillo, Pinotage, Carian, Cinsault, Grenache, and Counoise. So that's all been planted in this block of this one parcel. We pick it as a field blend, we pick it as one, and basically we've planted the blend. So, and then the second wine is planted just on the other side of the hill, in this instance facing due south. And what happens is, at that big granitic outcrop over there, what happens is the wind gushes, comes over this mountain, gushes down this valley, and it literally, the wind hits this vineyard 90 degrees dead on. And again, when the wind hits this vineyard that hard, all of the stomata shuts down, vines go into slumber, and the actual growing season just gets lengthened, because you lose so much of your growing season just because the vines are not optimum functioning. They go into their own protection system, so your season gets prolonged. And so that's the last vineyard we pick now, last fruit to come into the winery. The vineyard has, as a result of this, first of all, much more stunted growth, smaller shoots, shorter shoots, thinner shoots, smaller shoot internodium lengths, just super concentrated fruit, incredibly firm tannins, incredible texture and structure on the wine. So it makes a wine that's just completely different. Texturally, it's in a definition we haven't yet seen on some of our other wines, so it's a very welcome addition. So, and the idea and the concept about both wines is to plant the blend. So in the instance of Sonfang, this vineyard, the resultant wine, the blend's been planted, and whatever we pick out of this vineyard ends up together and ends up getting bottled together. I think for us it's very important, and there is obviously a culture for many producers to sit at desk level and blend up with cylinders, percentages, and trying to put a mythic wine together. But that's not our understanding of what we want to communicate. For us, the issue is, if you start working like that, like the terroirs at less of a play, one blends then to type of an ideology, a consumer expectation, one blends for reasons other than what's actually the given out of the site. So for us, not a consideration. Whatever we're going to pick in the block ends up in the wine. If the Alicante Bouschet has had a bad flowering and there's slightly less Alicante Bouschet in the blend, for example, that's the vintage indicators for that vintage, and actually a true reflection of what happened. We had sunburn in a little patch, obviously less, wind damage less in that. So for us, very important not to interfere with that, but actually just bottle that brutal truth. So big new change for us, 2 wines. I hope you enjoy them. They're new wines today, but they've actually started 20 years ago in terms of a future strategy. So all the varieties that we have collected and put together in these vineyards are form part of our future-proof strategy, also addressing climate change. So the varieties were chosen for their resistivity to hydric stress, heat, and they are in all isohydric grape varieties that have just greater resistivity, and hopefully that's one measure how we can address climate change. Obviously, when you look at the vineyard here behind me, all our cover crops, the greener parts, have now been rolled. We've crimped it with roller crimpers, so they've been crimped. They're going to dry out now. Intermittently, we've got mulching, so all the vegetation on here will become just a big mulch. And the reason for that is, first of all, by having a full ground cover, number one, we make it very difficult for the evapotranspiration, because we're sheeting all of the soil with a cover that kind of inhibits excessive evapotranspiration of your soil moisture. So it's just a blanket. Second condition is obviously having this full vegetative cover means that the solar radiation from the sun is mitigated, because now it's absorbed by the plant rests and not hitting the soil dead on. So our soils are cooler, and that also helps that your evapotranspiration is not too excessive. Also, when your soils are more homogeneous in temperature, it means that your soil microlife is actually at a significant improvement, because no organisms like massive temperature variations. So in terms of your trichoderma, microzobium, everything that's in your soil that's operating your system, you're just going to have a much bigger population of that, and it's just going to be at a better pace of operating. And then obviously the next thing is, this is all captured carbon, and with future seedbed preparation for the next cover crop that will follow after this season, all of this carbon will be introduced to the soil, and that in terms will increase our carbon percentage in our soil over time. And carbon is the silver bullet in soils in terms of significantly improving their water holding capacity and their mineral exchange and all of that. So carbon, very important. And last but not least, obviously the cover crops rolled, that's going to dry out now, and the mulching have a huge shading effect, which also mitigates our summer plant growth. Any other grass or weeds or whatever that want to grow won't, because of the shading effect. So nothing can really grow under this shaded layer, or out from underneath the shaded layer, and grow in the same cycle as the vines that's going to grow now and compete for the same space and water. So just an array of advantages from it, and yeah, it's a standard practice for us, and we're not alone in that. It's been a long practice here in South Africa. Then on the signature wines, different strategy and philosophy. Obviously, the idea with the 2 signature wines, Columella and Palladius, is to have 2 appellation wines. And in order to make a regional wine, one needs to encompass the important soils and the imported varieties. So Columella is 11 vineyards, 7 varieties, dispersed through all the red soils that's deemed as important in the Swartland for reds. So we've got that. And Palladius is actually 24 vineyards, 14 varieties as white grapes planted in the significant sites, to try and bring in all the dynamics of what the Swartland's about, and with the aim of having both of them as the best potential ambassadors for a significant cross section of what the Swartland can be in a red or white. The 23 was obviously an incredible vintage in the Swartland. We produce stellar wines across all sectors, and they are very finely stitched, incredibly balanced, texturally the equilibrium, tannins with great linearity, and yes, I think just two lovely wines. Only difference is Palladius, a number of years ago we planted some vineyards on the coast in limestone as a future dynamic for Palladius. That fruit's now been included in the 2023 vintage. 20% of the resultant wines actually from that component. Being limestone, being on the coast, obviously very saline, very briny, lots of minerality, lots of linear acidity, and it's kind of trimmed off the last of the puppy fat on the Palladius, and it will be now standard in all Palladius going forward. That development was done. Vineyards are now at an age where we can include the fruit, so that's been also a bit of a change. It's going to make a big future difference in the Palladius. Yes, and that's about the wrap for the vintage. I want to thank Berry Brothers and the team for all their support in the United Kingdom, and yes, I apologize for not being there, but our season have started and we're running around. But I hope to visit all of you soon in the United Kingdom, and that we can be in the same space and share a glass of wine. Enjoy the wines. Thank you very much.